I'm Larry Beckwith. I'm the Artistic Director of Toronto Masque Theatre, and I'm here with Andrew Downing, the multifaceted musician, jazz musician, classical musician, double bassist, composer, teacher. And TMT audiences will know Andrew from his performances in The Soldier's Tale and Dean Burry's Mummer's Masque a few years ago. And we're very excited to have Andrew and his group performing with us in May at the Fleck Dance Theatre as part of our Turkish evening, Les Indes Mécaniques in the first half and Andrew's band in the second half. So for our purposes for this show, you're delving into your interest and your expertise in Turkish music. And I wonder if you could just explain a little bit of where that interest developed and where it came about.
Sure. Well, it began, I would say, probably about, I'm going to say 17 to 20 years ago when I met a lovely Turkish woman named Yeşim, who not long after that became my wife. So we started to go to Istanbul every year to visit her family, among other things, and it sort of developed into our need and our want, I guess, to visit Istanbul for long periods of time. It's where she grew up, and being in Toronto, she feels homesick sometimes, and so for us to be in Istanbul for 2 or 3 months a year, we both feel pretty good there, and it's a really nice way to live in a completely different place and live in a completely different culture, but one that's very familiar to her. So being a musician and being someone who is curious about many aspects of music, one of the years that we were there, I decided just to take a couple of lessons in Turkish music, because my very, very cursory knowledge of music in Turkey was just that it's completely different from Western music. And I just thought, if I'm there for a while, I may as well do some work and try to just, be curious about Turkish music. So I took a lesson with a gentleman named Güç Bashar Gulay, and I just found him on the internet. I Googled Turkish music teacher English, and his was the first website that came up. And as soon as I met him, we hit it off. And he's a fantastic teacher. His experiences with jazz music and with Turkish music aligned with mine in the completely opposite way. He was really interested in jazz music, so he started to learn it, and he went to the United States to study at Berkeley.
Okay.
And after that went back to Istanbul, and when back in Istanbul, he decided that he was going to sort of find ways to combine jazz music and Turkish music. And so we could speak on the same level.
Perfect for you, I was going to say, yeah. And
in this kind of teacher-student relationship that we have, we decided that we would just find a way to play together also. So we both wrote music that was based on this kind of Turkish musical structure, and found a way to improvise with it like jazz musicians do. So the music that we created was somewhere in between Turkish music and jazz music.
Oh, that's fascinating. So tell me about Turkish music. How is it? I mean, I know it as well as being very foreign, very different from the Western classical tradition. When we talk about classical Turkish music, what are we talking about?
It's sort of like the court music from Turkey. It seems to me, and your word expertise maybe that you used before may be a little exaggerated. The more, I mean, like anything else, the more I learn about the music, the more I realize how deep it is and how much there is to learn. And so I feel like I've just sort of scratched the surface of how it's built. But the classical music is it's basically the court music, and there's folk music and classical music, and they sort of use the same structures, but the classical music is a little more complicated, a little more. It has more patience in it. It has longer structures. It has longer forms, and the music goes more places. Much the same as Western folk music and Western classical music. They use the same structures and the same musical language in a way, but the classical music is just it takes more time and has more stuff in it, I guess.
And do we talk about songs or?
There are songs.
Yeah,
there are compositions. There's a instrumental composition called a saz semai, which is sort of a virtuosic thing, a bit like a concerto maybe, but a little more song-like than a concerto. There are songs. There are things called peshrevs, which are long instrumental compositions that a bunch of different instruments play together, and there are improvised sections called taksims, and each of these groups of or these different kinds of music go together in a group to have a set of music to be played together in a set of music.
And what kinds of instruments are we talking about?
Well, there are in fact violins and cellos, and the cello is usually the bass instrument of the group. There's a Turkish string instrument called a kemençe, which is like a small pear-shaped violin that maybe looks like a rebec. It's that sort of shape and size, and it's played like a viola da gamba. It's very small and has 3 strings, and that's a very traditional Turkish instrument. There are kanuns, which are like a zither a little bit, or sort of like the inside of a piano that's played by plucking the strings. There's some percussion involved, usually a large frame drum and some drums called kudum drums, which are just sort of, they mark the beat. It's like a low drum and a high drum that just sort of mark the time signature of these compositions. And there's also a ney, which is like a wooden flute.
So there are different families of instruments, or different. I can tell just from your descriptions that there are different, a wide range of timbres anyway that would make up a really interesting ensemble. So what's your way in as both as a performer and a composer? I mean, as a double bass player, I understand you don't play double bass in the Turkish.
No, I play cello in the Turkish ensemble. Partly because the way the instruments are, it fits a little better because all the instruments play melody. That's one very particular thing about the Turkish music, is that everyone plays the melody together. So there isn't really any harmony, there isn't really any counterpoint. The way the music deepens is by everybody ornamenting it differently. So it sounds like everyone's sort of together and sort of not together, but it makes this really interesting texture within the music. So yeah, I play cello in the group.
Okay. So how has this interest or fascination with Turkish music affected your own compositional life?
Well, it's the main thing that it's done is my connection with Turkish music is mostly for this particular group. So I write music for this group, but I write it sort of based on how the Turkish music is structured, but not being an expert in it, and not wanting to reproduce something that is real Turkish music. I find that I want to use this language and this structure to make music that sounds like my own music.
Right.
So that's mostly how it's gotten in. However, studying the structures of the music and the forms of the music have actually really informed how I think about forms in Western music also, and in particular the saz samai, this form that I was talking about. There's a sort of a structure where it's sort of like a rondo form, and I've used that structure to write some pieces that are not, they don't sound like Turkish music at all, but just using that structure I found it really interesting and really freeing in a way. And
you have a singer in your group as well.
That's right.
So what kinds of texts do you use for?
Well, she's actually singing traditional music. Okay. So how we're structuring this evening, and how we've actually found a really nice, successful way to present a concert, is that she sings traditional songs, some folk songs and some classical songs, and then I've actually taken the structures and the formats of those songs and composed sort of responses to them. So the pieces of music that I've written that will follow these traditional songs are my own, but they rely heavily on how the songs are formed to inform how they were composed.
It's kind of fascinating because the first half of the program is the same kind of thing actually, where Marie-Nathalie Lacoursière has taken an existing opera, a French opera, Les Indes Mécaniques, and devised a whole new scenario and worked it choreographically, so it's a ballet, but it uses the same music and some of the songs out of the opera, but sets it in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Have you ever been in the Topkapi? You have?
I've been there twice.
Can you describe it for us?
It's magnificent. It's a beautiful, beautiful palace right in the oldest part of Istanbul. Istanbul is it's a very interesting city. The Bosphorus runs up the middle of it and actually divides Europe and Asia.
Hmm.
And on the European side, there's the newer part, which is where we live when we're there. And then across a little bit of water called the Golden Horn, there's a small bridge. And on the southern part of that is Sultanahmet, which is the old part of town. And that's where Topkapi Palace is.
Hmm.
And it's really over the top, beautiful, ornate. The grounds are beautiful. The gardens are beautiful. It's quite a place.
Neat. Well, I wish I could go to Istanbul. Maybe I will someday. I'd love to. Is there anything else that we should know about your portion of this evening in our show?
Well, it's one of the things that I enjoy so much about learning this music is that when I come back to Canada, I get to play it with Canadian musicians. So in Istanbul, I play with Turkish musicians who are really, it's great to meet musicians of the same mind, where we want to take a traditional music and do our own thing with it. And coming back to Canada, the musicians that we're playing with, so it's Peter Lutek and Dimitrios Petsalakis, Ben Grossman, and Brennan McCrimmon is the singer. They are interested in the music the same way that I am. So none of us are necessarily experts in the music, except for maybe Brenna. She has spent a tremendous amount of time in Istanbul and is a really amazing singer of Turkish music. But we all bring our own sort of Canadian personality to the music, and I just think it makes for sort of an interesting take on this music. It's not traditional Turkish music, but I think, in my humble opinion, that it has enough of the spirit of what that is to sort of create a new thing.
That's wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you part of this show. May 14th and 15th at the Fleck Dance Theatre. Andrew Downing and Anahtar, his Turkish group, and we look forward to having you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.